Nintendo has finally given us a closer look at the Nintendo Switch 2, while also giving us new details about exclusive games and features. And while I'm very excited for the future of this console, I'm also scared about how this will affect us as a consumer. As a quick disclaimer, I'm not going to go over every little detail that they showed off, but rather just giving my thoughts on everything. The first thing I want to talk about is the hardware. I think a lot of people would agree that at most we were only expecting a 1080p 60Hz system. Instead, Nintendo went above that and provided us with a 120Hz system, which also means that we can get up to 120 FPS depending on the titles. On top of that, it can also support HDR. I guess the only downside to this console is the fact that it's LCD rather than OLED. However, I want people to remember that people tend to forget that the technological advancement of LCD screens has improved. The last thing about the screen is that it's now going to be 7.9 inches compared to the original 6.2 inches of the Switch. For me personally, I feel like around 8 inches should be the max screen size for a handheld device, only because anything bigger than that can cause the device to get bigger, and depending on how big the device becomes might make the user experience more uncomfortable. The storage also got upgraded from 32GB to 256. With that, the Switch 2 also supports microSD Express, as compared to the regular microSD. I also don't remember exactly where I heard it from, but apparently, Lexar is going to be releasing a 1TB microSD Express card, considering that as of right now, the highest capacity that we currently have is only 256 gigs, which means in total, you'd have a little over somewhere 500 gigs. Nintendo also went into more depth about the C button. It's basically Nintendo's version of Discord, but with Nintendo quirks, if that makes sense. Specifically, you can screen share, but the functionality of it just works. And from what we saw, it's choppy, but hey, it works. On top of that, you can use a very low quality camera to show yourself off when playing games, for an extra charge. Now I'm all for Nintendo trying to show us and allow us to socialize with people, but adding a camera accessory to the console is just meh. I mean, Xbox did it back then with the Kinect, and PlayStation has had one for the last 4 generations of PlayStation consoles. Not a lot of people have used them, if any, but the option is there. The console does have a built-in microphone if you want to use it for socializing. Otherwise, you can use your own mic with your own headphones. Personally, I'm never going to use this social feature for 2 reasons. The first reason is because it requires NSO, which I don't have, but we'll talk about that later. And then secondly, I just don't have friends to play with.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine.
Moving on. Nintendo also showed us the new Pro Controller. It's practically the same as the current one, except the top portion of it is white, it has USB-C, 2 back buttons that I'll probably never use, and has the game chat button, which I'll also never use, which we've already discussed. They also showed off their new GameCube controller, and it's the same as the last one, but also with USB-C for charging and game chat. Now it's time for the games, and there's a lot to talk about. First of all, I want to talk about Mario Kart World. We'll get to that later. Anyways, it's the next Mario Kart game set to release on the Nintendo Switch, but it's exclusive to the Switch 2. Now, I'm not sure if this is meant to be a spin-off or a sequel to 8 because I don't know if they ever clarified that. But as the name suggests, it's an open-world version of Mario Kart. The game has 3 modes: the standard Grand Prix, a new rally mode, which is like the Mario Kart of Battle Royale, and a free roam. Outside of the racing, they also changed character and kart selection. More specifically, remember the kart customization feature that you may or may not have liked from the last 2 games? Well, guess what? They got rid of that. And the gliders. But they replaced those with plane wings. But you can also rail grind now. Was it a happy trade-off? Well, we'll find out. Oh, and before I forget, they added the cow from Moo Moo Meadows as a racer, and this guy. Donkey Kong Bonanza. There's not much that I have to say for this game other than the fact that it's a Donkey Kong version of Super Mario Odyssey. You can destroy the environment, find secrets, and you can Surf in this game as well. 10 out of 10. Although IGN would probably give it a 7 out of 10. The one thing I do like about this game is how DK's new character design adds to his personality. The Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. It's essentially a digital and interactive menu with mini games and tips about how the system works. However, it's basically looks like just a less fun version of Astro's Playroom. But hey, at least it's a free... Wait, it's not? Anyways, moving on. They finally added GameCube games to the Switch through the online subscription. But as an incentive to get you to buy the Switch 2, they made it exclusive to the console. But personally, I would have preferred if they just allowed me to buy the games outright rather than just paying for the subscription. But to start with, they added Soul Calibur 2, which includes Link, in this version at least, and they also added the beloved Wind Waker game, which I'm sure a lot of you have been wanting.
Damn, what is that, bro?
Speaking of The Legend of Zelda, and moving on to the next subject, they're re-releasing a Switch 2 version of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Shocker. These new versions will, though, support 4K 60 in docked mode or 1080p 60 in handheld. If you already have the games, you can upgrade to these versions for a $10 fee or for free if you already have NSO. However, based on my understanding, and I could be wrong, if you want a Switch 1 copy and pay the upgrade fee, then it will download a Switch 2 version that is separate rather than just updating the game you already have. Which means you'll have two versions of a game downloaded onto your system, which just wastes your storage. However, those aren't the only games getting a Switch 2 upgrade. Games like Kirby, Metroid, and Pokemon are also getting upgraded. Outside of Switch 2 upgraded games, there's also third-party games, and there's quite a bit. Elden Ring, Street Fighter, Cyberpunk, Split Fiction, Borderlands, and a new exclusive called The Duskbloods. Granted, those aren't all of them, but those are just to name a few. And out of the ones that I did name, they will be available for the Switch 2 at launch, except for Borderlands 4 and The Duskbloods. The last new thing to talk about is the UI. The home screen menu looks nearly identical to what we currently have, except it seems to have that Apple polish by curving the edges. Also, what's this icon? I've never seen this before. Then we have the eShop. Just like the home menu, it kind of looks the same as the current eShop, except it's just polish. But as a plus, they did move our wish list onto the main drop-down menu. Now with all of that out of the way, I want to talk about the criticisms. The biggest criticism that people have with the Switch 2 is the pricing. Now I'm not talking about the console itself, but rather the pricing of the games. Because as we all know by now, Mario Kart World is $80 unless you buy it with the bundle, which will save you $30 on the game. But if you're someone who still cares about the physical games, good luck. Also, Nintendo has made the jump from $60 to $70 games, which was kind of expected to begin with. But with the Switch 2 edition games, the pricing of those seem to vary depending on the upgrade. If the upgrade is just a regular visual and performance enhancement, then the upgrade is just $10. But if the upgrade adds content, which you'd know if it has a plus symbol in the naming, then it seems to be a $20 upgrade. But in general, it doesn't sound that bad until you add the cost of the games, the console, the accessories, the subscription. Nintendo, please. You're upsetting our hearts and hurting our wallets. The amount of pain I'm getting from seeing the prices of everything makes me feel like the fish guy from SpongeBob when his eyes are burning. For about a week, a lot of Nintendo consumers, specifically Americans including myself, thought that they'd have to pay way over MSRP due to some economic politics. Now, I'm not going to go over into specifics because this isn't a political channel, it's a gaming channel. However, as of recently, it seems like maybe we won't have to worry anymore considering that those issues are at a pause for the next 3 months. As to when we get our chance to pre-order, I don't really know. Also, one issue I want to talk about in terms of pricing is price to performance. Specifically, I'm talking about Nintendo's third-party support games like Elden Ring, Cyberpunk, Borderlands, and so on. There's no doubt in my mind that these games are going to sell for full MSRP on the Switch 2. And with that being said, when factoring in the price of those games, plus the price of the Switch 2, you're practically within the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X pricing, and those consoles perform better. The point being is that the price to performance of those games is much better on the consoles as compared to the Switch 2. Granted, I understand why they did this. It's mainly to show off the third-party support, while also showcasing the console's capabilities. But for the same price, I can get better performance on a different platform for nearly the same price. Oh, and one last thing before I go. You want to know the funniest and worst thing Nintendo has said so far? Essentially, they pulled a Don Matrick move. You know, the guy who told people that if they were too broke to buy an Xbox One, to go play an Xbox 360. Specifically, it was Doug Bowser. What he said is, quote, "We recognize that there are some people that may not be able to afford the Switch 2's price point. That's why we wanted to make the other Switch platforms available, so people still have an opportunity to come into our gaming universe, be a part of these characters in these worlds, and see value, if you will, in whatever rung of the platform they come in." Sounds a lot like Don Matrick. Take a listen to what he said.
Games.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think people are going to love it, and then they're going to understand what we're trying to create and how it links games and entertainment, the functionality of the box, some of the advantages that you get of having a box that is designed
Right.
to use an online state. So that, to me, is a future-proof choice, and I think people could have arguably gone the other way if we didn't do it, and fortunately we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360.
Right. So stick with 360. That's your message. If you don't,
Well,
people don't like it.
if you have...
It sounds the same, except it's just different words. But at the end of the day, while all of this seems exciting, it's also concerning, not only from the consumer's standpoint, but also the business. All I know is that this is going to be very interesting. Anyways, that's the end of today's video. If you enjoyed, then leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.